welcome to the Total Country Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Total Country Podcast. My name's Kevin and thanks for joining me today. My guest today is Elliott, but before we get onto that, I want to tell you quickly about a live stream I'm hosting on the Total Country Podcast Facebook page on the 7th of August. If you're listening to this after that date, don't worry, you can still find the event on the video section of the Facebook page. On August 7th, to celebrate the UK digital release of the documentary Bluebird, An Accidental Landmark That Changed History, I'm hosting the Bluebird Cafe Celebration, a fully live 3 or so hour event featuring live acts for the first 2 hours, which are TBC at the time of recording, and culminating in a fully interactive interview with Erica Woolham-Nichols, COO/GM of the Bluebird Cafe Nashville and alumni of this podcast, and she'll be joined by the absolutely incredible Tony Arata, who you may know for helping Garth Brooks get his record deal and for writing one of the biggest hits, The Dance. On the night, I'll be opening up the floor to questions, so if you have one for Erica or Tony, join me live, and who knows, we might even be able to get Tony to perform the dance on the stream. You can find more details on the Total Country Podcast Facebook page. Right, on to today's show. I'm excited to be welcoming Nashville-born artist Elliott for one of his first UK-based interviews today. Carl has what I call a proper old-school country voice, and likens his music to Chris Stapleton, Eric Church and Randy Travis. He's Nashville born and bred and has a really hard-working approach to music, as you'll hear in this interview. He released his first single, Anymore, in 2017 and has since then honed and worked on his craft. His most recent single, Love Hangover, was released in March of this year and is a brilliant slice of contemporary Nashville country. As you'll hear in this interview, Carl has made a conscious decision to focus on building his UK fan base, and I'm sure will succeed. I hope you enjoy learning about Kyle, his music and his life, and if you aren't already, go on to become a fan. So here we go, my conversation with Elliott. So I have Kyle Elliott on the line. Kyle, how are you, mate? You all right?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for taking time out to do this. I know you're doing a lot of UK-focused media and live streams and stuff at the moment, aren't you? So question to start off with. What was it about the UK sort of country scene that made you want to kind of focus on us for a bit?
Well, I have a pretty good background in marketing and entrepreneurship, and one of the things they teach us in kind of that field is to find your niche market. And if you've been to Nashville or if you've been to the South or even anywhere in the U.S., country has saturated the music industry here. And one thing that the UK or the Europeans do not have is country accents. So I don't have to worry about a lot of saturation happening over there. So there's an opportunity. And plus, if I ever do get the chance to go play shows, why would I want to just go down the street? I want to travel the world and play some shows. So the idea to promote over the UK is just, it's part of a grand plan that I have.
Had you done some research about the UK or spoke to anyone that's performed over here and fed back, or?
I have some friends. You know that I'm working with Scarlet River Management, and Danny McMahon is one of the artists that they've worked with. And I actually met him at a show here in Nashville. We were doing a writers' round together, and we got to talking. And I talked to the management team and to Danny, and they were just telling me about all the opportunities. As you know, there's a few pretty big festivals over there that they do for country music, and the lineups that they were having, I didn't even recognize, more than half of the names on that list. And I'm like, who are these people? And I found out that a good portion of them are actually European artists, which is really well. But I thought, well, there's an opportunity, and a door opened up because I'm not a big name yet, at least. Yes. The chance of me probably getting through that door are a lot better than me trying to force my way in here in the U.S. because it is so saturated. And there's been success. I mean, Danny was supposed to play at the Country to Country Festival this year. And I mean, if he can do it, why can't I do it? That's kind of the mentality I went with.
Absolutely. I think the feedback that I think US acts always say, and you hear it time and time again, is we're an album sort of crowd, when obviously the US market is, top 40, single. You hear the same 10 tracks on the radio all day. Right. So if you've got like a track 9 on an album or something that you think is really good, and you just get frustrated it's not getting the attention it deserves, you can guarantee once you're known over here, then everyone will know every single song.
See, and that's an interesting point you bring up. That's a huge strategy here in the U.S., especially in the country market. It's so expensive to produce and to put out music here. I can't even afford to put 12 songs out at one time if I wanted to. But what I think of them as are called filler songs, because usually on an album you have maybe 2, 3 songs that people are just really excited about, and the other ones are good, but they fall by the wayside because everybody focuses on those couple of tracks. Well, releasing single by single forces you to listen to every single song as it's coming out. And then once somebody finds you, they can go back into your repertoire and find the rest of the music, which is what I'm hopeful for, because I have released some music already and probably that people haven't heard. And yeah, I encourage people to go back and look at that.
Perfect. So Brits, as you know, probably like to ask the question, how's the weather? I've replaced that now with how's your quarantine been? So how's your quarantine been? Have you been doing any home projects, any writing?
Oh, I've been actually a little busier than I was expecting. I've been doing home renovations for like the past year and a half. Giving me some time to focus more on that. But I've been doing a lot of writing as well, more than I had been previously by a long shot. I've been focusing for the past year and a half on the music that I'm releasing more so than the writing. So it's given me a chance to get back into that. And just a little bit more time to do more research. Nashville is still fairly closed down. They're actually going back a step into lockdown, which means that the restaurants and the bars and the venues I typically play at are closed. And if they are open, chances are they're not allowing very many people in, and probably not going to be that many people in town anyway. But what's great about Tennessee is there's so many communities around Nashville that offer live music as well. I've been able to branch out into the suburbs here and find there are a lot of great venues. And one amazing thing about it is typically they care more about the music because they don't get it as often as Nashville does. So the little venue I played in a town of 20,000 people is really excited that there's live music this Friday, whereas the place in Nashville I go to, people are walking by and they don't even give it a second look. So it's really been humbling to find people that actually care a little bit more about the music.
So let's go back then. For those of you that don't know, you're from just outside Nashville, aren't you? Born and bred.
I was born actually about a mile from Music Row in Nashville, and until I was old enough for grade school, my family lived in Nashville as well. Obviously, it's a city, so my parents wanted my education to be a little bit more of a suburban feel, so we moved to the suburb, which at the time was a gas station and a Cracker Barrel, or the Southern food chain here in the U.S. and open fields, and that was it. And it was an amazing little town, maybe 15,000 people. Today, the town's over 50,000 people, just a couple decades later. And I don't currently live there anymore. I live in another suburb about 45 minutes south of Nashville, but it's mainly because I can't afford to live in Nashville.
I can imagine.
But it's been great growing up in this part of the country. I absolutely love Tennessee. I mean, I know people can't see it on the podcast, but I've got a Tennessee flag here behind me. I'm very proud of where I'm from, and I couldn't imagine growing up and living anywhere else.
So what was growing up for you like then? Was there music around the house? Do your parents come from a musical background? Talk me through that.
Sure. So it's not quite as storytelling or fantasy as you would think. My dad wasn't a drummer or a producer. My mom wasn't, someone in the PR world or anything like that. No, I'm from a pretty traditional American household. My mother does have somewhat of a music background, but it's not commercial music. She actually went to school for vocal performance, which is more on the classical side of things. And when I was a kid, she ended up becoming a high school music teacher, which is great because it allowed me to learn a lot of fundamental things about music. There are proper techniques to singing to make sure that your voice is healthy. A lot of people don't even know that you can have an unhealthy voice. There are a lot of things, and I learned a lot about music theory. I actually studied music in university for some time, but that's, I think, where a lot of that comes from. She was the music director for our church when I was a kid, and there's video of me at the age of 3 singing on stage at church, which is really cool to look back and see. But my parents were not heavily involved in commercial music by any means. My dad is not involved in music at all. He works as like a home designer, so it's very unique to the family. But As far as growing up to the music, at the age of 13, my grandfather gave me my first guitar. That's a little bit more of the fantasy story that everyone. But we had a lot of friends in the area, and being in Nashville, you don't really have a choice but to be surrounded by it. A neighbor of ours was a studio bass player who is now the bass player for Eric Church.
Oh wow! Okay.
And from grade school. His dad is the drummer for Garth Brooks. I mean, you can't escape it. You know, no matter where you go, somebody knows somebody is involved in the industry. But it was really cool to grow up so close to it, but not so into it. It's kind of given me a trailblazer feel to the industry.
So was it a straight route to country for you, or did you go through like a rock phase, or?
Absolutely not. It was definitely not a country direct. I grew up in the 90s, so the 90s hip-hop, 90s grunge was definitely a big thing. And I have an older sister as well, so, you know, she was blaring Backstreet Boys from her room 24/7 when I was a kid. My dad always had 80s rock and roll on the radio, and my mother grew up in the 70s, so you have a little bit more of that 70s contemporary style. So all of it. That's one of the best things about growing up in a musically diverse household is you do get the option to learn different types. But throughout high school, I was really into the pop or the punk kind of scene, the alternative style. And I still love that today. But as I went to college, I decided I wanted to be a performer, just for a hobby, really. And I was actually in school at the time for audio production. I thought, well, if I'm going to do music, I'll be behind the scenes. I'll make, mix and master and everything. And that didn't work out. But in the time, I was doing some demo work, and I had some friends from my hometown, and they were like, hey, would you record us? And I was like, I need to record for free for schooling. So we ended up working together, and I ended up joining the band with them because I enjoyed what they were doing so much. And I did that for about 4 years. You can still find some of the music online. It's not great. Don't trust me. But it taught me a lot. And I wrote a lot of songs with them. It taught me a lot about musicianship from the creative side, not necessarily so much from the mechanical side. And some techniques that I even still use today in the country world. But after college, I realized that was just a hobby, and there was no way to make a living off of that because pop punk is dead, essentially. So I got a real job. I was actually a radio personality for a short time, and that does not pay well at all, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
So I ended up joining the marketing field in the transportation world, and I hated a lot of it. I hated working for somebody else, and I decided one day that if I was going to do this, that I was only young once and that I needed to do it now. And so in 2016, I sat down and I wrote a song. And because I'm naive and had no idea what I was doing, I released that first song. And that song is called Anymore, which you can actually find on my Spotify and streaming pages today. But I released that in 2017, and I've just been growing and building ever since.
You released your first ever song you wrote to the public.
Yes. Which if there are any songwriters, any artists listening, I highly recommend that you do not do that. If you do not make it a ballad. That is another big one.
That's bullshit. I like that.
It's also pretty interesting though, because I think of it as an audible scrapbook. I can see the progression, but you don't have to release something for that to happen.
You can just keep that to yourself.
Exactly. But there's no turning back now.
I'd be interested to know, do you think you have a more grounded view of Nashville because you grew up there? Because I imagine when a lot of songwriters move there, it's like a dream, it's something to work towards. So it comes with like a certain sparkle and sheen. Do you think you see it different and have a more realistic view of the town?
I would say I do see it differently, but maybe not necessarily in that way. I think I see it more so as a sparkle than most.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people don't know this. I'm actually, and not during lockdown, unfortunately, but my day job before the virus, I was a tour guide in Nashville.
Oh, okay.
And one of the most incredible experiences that I've had the opportunity to do. It worked so well with the music world because I only worked like 3 hours a day. I got to make my own schedule. There was food and alcohol involved during work. I mean, what more could you ask for? And the money wasn't bad either. So it was a really sweet gig, and I hope I can get back to that at least for a little while. But I love the city through and through, inside and out, not just country. It's so much more than that.
Yeah.
It used to be such a different world than it is today. I mean, if you look at pictures, you can just see the crazy differences. And being a tour guide, I had to learn a lot of the things, but I knew a lot of the things about my city as well. And it's just so rich, full of unique histories and unique stories. And there's not many of us left. And that's what's kind of sad about it, is the history is kind of dissipating from the city. But I absolutely love it. But as far as people coming to Nashville, I do kind of envy that a little bit. Even if you move from the other side of the world, you have a community that you come from, and I encourage people to stay there for a little bit longer than you might want to, but grow your fan base where you're at. Because once you get to Nashville, it's very, very difficult, because the people that do come listen to you are probably just passing through town, and they're not going to come back to shows because they're not going to be here. Growing up here and not having the opportunity to create a fan base in a town or in a country somewhere else has actually, I think, put me at a little bit of a disadvantage. And I encourage people to stay put a little bit longer. And as I find, it's almost better to not be in Nashville. If you're live shows, at least, like I was telling you, some of the suburbs around town are 10 times better. I played shows in Florida, on the beaches in Florida, or in cold in Wisconsin. And I tell you, my crowds there are 7 times larger than they are here in town. The money that I get from tips and from payment is usually 5-6 times what I make in Nashville. So yeah, I don't get to be home, but at the same time, it's appreciated just so much more. Oh. But don't get me wrong, this is the place to be. It's an interesting sort of equation you have to work out.
What's your most interesting tour guide fact about Nashville then? What's something people maybe wouldn't know?
Oh, dang, that's putting me on the spot here. If you come to Nashville, there's a pretty amazing building. It's not very old actually, but it's the Country Music Hall of Fame. And it used to be over on Music Row, but it moved in the early 2000s to right downtown Nashville. And the architecture of that building is so subtle, yet so detailed that it's literally infused with music. The windows on the front of the building actually are resembling a keyboard. You can see the actual keys on a piano. If you look at the building from the over top looking down, it looks like a bass clef on a music staff. There's a tower sticking out of it, which is resemblant of the original radio tower from WSM or the Grand Ole Opry radio station. I mean, there's every piece of that building has something to do with music or Tennessee or something in Nashville. And it's just an amazing, amazing facility. And if you get the chance, it is the best tour that you can go on, at least for country music purposes. It's just amazing.
Good fact. So you've decided you want to go into music, and you live in Nashville. Does that make it easier for you to find good people for production or to work with, or does it make no difference for you?
Yeah, it definitely makes it a lot easier. There are so many people. When I set out, my first song, actually, a family friend of ours does production. He does typically live production, but he has a home studio, and I knew he had done some work before, so I reached out, and it's an amazing guy. His company is the Underground Treehouse, but I found out that he does a lot of work for people in Europe, actually.
Oh, okay.
And people will send him stuff, and then he does the musicianship part of it. He writes the music, he produces it, he mixes it. And what I've actually been able to do is he's brought me in to do demos and sing on some of those songs. And I'll come back to this because there's actually a connection to the UK, but nice. I was able to just go down the street, and there he was, and I could record my song, and I could go into the studio. I didn't have to record separately and then send in the files, and that's definitely a plus. Now, as I progressed and I started working on this latest project, the first song in the project is Sunrise. I started looking for bigger, more fuller producers, and I must have talked to 75 different producers in this process, all based in Nashville, ranging from $300 a song to $4,000 a song. that had all types of backgrounds, and they had so many testimonies from big artists. I mean, I was talking to Florida Georgia Line's producer for a while, and
Nice.
but it's so hard because just because somebody has a great price does not mean that it's good production. And just because somebody has a high price does not mean it's the sound that you want. I probably went into 24 studios and listened to some of their work, and I definitely disappointed a lot of people. But I found who one was I thought was going to be the best person to work with, not just for the musicality, but because we blended well as individuals. We worked well as a team. Price wise, I had to figure that in. And that was so easy because I didn't have to make phone calls or send emails. Yes, I did do that originally, but I got to actually meet the person. And I think that goes so much further than just the surface of finding a good producer.
Nice. Perfect. Cool. So let's talk about music in more detail. So I was a big fan of your previous single, Love Hangover. So that reminds me of kind of like a Jason Aldean type vibe is what I get from that. But let's talk about the new single. So it's called Come On Over. It's out on August the 7th. And I love this one, honestly. So talk to me about the track and the story behind it.
Sure. So as I mentioned before, it's all part of a big project that I've been working on since January of 2019. It's a 6-song project, and this song will be number 3. So there's still 3 more songs to come after it. And at the end of the whole project, I'm going to re-release them all together as an EP. And if you were to listen to them in the order that I released them in, it tells kind of a continuity story. It's all spread out over the entire 6-song project, which I think is a really cool concept. But Come On Over, I wrote that, and I didn't write them in order either. This kind of just all formed together on its own.
Nice.
But Come On Over was it's partially a true story, but I think everybody can relate to it. It talks about having a relationship, and this doesn't even have to be, a love relationship or anything. It could just be a relationship of somebody that you had in the past. And sometimes we grow apart from our friends, or sometimes we do grow apart from our lovers. And you see things, or you're reminded of things, and you're like, man, I've changed so much, and things could be better. Things could work now. We could be friends again. We can be together again. And I promise it's going to work. All we got to do is just get back together. Just hang out. Just be together. And that's the whole meaning of the song. Just come on over. We'll make it work. Come on over. And the honest truth is that almost never happens. But I think that's what's so great about the song is it gives you the idea that yes, it's going to work, but at the end of the song, you realize that it's not. And I think that's what makes it so relatable is most of us have been in that exact situation. And that's one of the reasons why I write music is to relate to people who can use the songs for their personal gain as far as getting through a tough situation or knowing, hey, I'm not the only person that feels that way.
And is this a solo write, or did you write this with a small team? Or
This was a solo write, which is pretty unusual these days. Most songs are co-written. One of the things about not living downtown, like I said, I live about 45 minutes away, is it's not easy for me to drive 45 minutes there and 45 minutes and not be guaranteed something. And when you write something, there's not always a guarantee that you're going to write a song. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I've really relied heavily on myself. I've pushed myself to say, hey, you're not going to be able to write all the time with people like some of the artists in Nashville do.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do this on your own part-time. And I think the best way to tell a story that I've experienced is to tell it from within. And when you get multiple heads together, sometimes that message becomes altered. And not that that's a bad thing, but I do want to tell my story too. I mean, there's 3 songs on the project that are co-written, and that's great. I think it's good to have other people in there. But this one specifically was actually fairly easy. It came out quickly, and I tend to say when there's a song that you have a personal connection to and that is true and from the heart, that it just falls out of you. And sometimes it takes months, years to write songs. There's songs I have unfinished from 3 years ago, but this one took I think just a couple hours, and I think it turned out great. I didn't think it was going to be a big song or even a part of the project when I wrote it. But as I pitched my songs to different people in the industry, they were like, "This is one that we all can come back to." And I'm so excited because it's become something that I never thought that it would be, and it's been cool to watch the experience happen.
Are you often a sort of a spark moment songwriter then, or will you sit down and try and write?
So I have a note on my phone that's probably 12 pages long of song titles.
Nice.
And I also have a voice memo that is probably fuller than it could be on my phone as well. So whenever I think of something, and typically it comes up in conversation, somebody will say a phrase or a word or something that just triggers it. And I'm like, I got to write that down. And inspired by other songs too, other artists' songs. Maybe it's a line from their song, or maybe it's just the idea. And this one wasn't quite like that. This one just, I didn't really have the song title when I sat down to write it. I just had the idea of, I'm ready to give this thing a second shot with a significant other, and I think that it can work, and this is how I feel on the inside. And then it kind of led to the phrase "come on over," which I think is cool. I think it wrote itself in a lot of ways.
Nice. So going back to the project, what made you want to go down that sort of concept route? Because, I mean, we were talking about it before we started recording. There's a lot of focus on the singles, and, that's quite a sort of troubadourian sort of 70s type thing to sort of do a concept, isn't it? What was the inspiration for that?
It is. And, that's what we did a lot in the pop punk days of music that I did. We would release, very continuity type of albums where they would try to make sense with each other. And I thought that was just a great idea, because when you listen to a song on the radio, if you don't actually listen to the song, it can still be a good song. It's catchy, there's a hook. And sometimes songs have great stories, but they're not always very catchy. And I thought, why not go beyond that? I'm always mind blown when somebody has written something in a book or put something in a song, and then you find out information literally years later, and you're like, wow, I can't believe they were that detailed in their thought process. And I want the music to be deeper than just the music or just the lyrics. I want it to be a story, and the way that you interpret it might be different than the way that I wrote it and interpreted it, but that's fine. That's kind of the idea.
And going down that route, will you focus a lot on the artwork and production side of that as well to make it that whole package, or haven't you thought that far?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually recorded some of the instrumentation for all projects at one time. Because of the way musicians work here in Nashville, the drummer that I'm using for this project is very, very busy. He travels most of the year. So I couldn't get him to record 6 different sessions of drums. So we brought all the music in on one day. I think it was May of last year. And he recorded drums, all of it. And the guitar players and the steel players and things like that, they'll come in at one time and they'll record as well. I actually haven't even done the vocals for the last 3 songs yet. That's probably the last addition that goes in on most of the songs, is the lyric or the vocal part. Yeah. And that way we can really put a lot of emphasis on the emotion, because I think that's where most of the emotion is in the vocal part of a song. And that's what the producer and I try to focus on the most. Nice.
Do you have a songwriter or songwriters or even artists that you kind of look up to or aspire to as a benchmark of success that you'd like to attain?
Sure. So people ask me all the time, what's the final, what's the outcome look like for you? What's your big picture? I tell people I don't have to be selling out arenas across the world. I don't have to be Luke Combs, playing, to 100,000 people crowds or whatever. That would be awesome. Don't get me wrong. But, I really just want to make a living out of music. If I can play a couple of shows here and there and make a solid living, that's fine. If I have to play a show every day, that's fine. I want my music to be heard. That's kind of it. If I had to pick an artist that I really like the style that they roll with, I've seen Chris Young in concert at one of the big arenas here in Nashville. Yeah. I also don't think of him as the superstar that sells out arenas all the time. And I like that idea. I think that's a great mentality of a good balance of music and life. And I don't want to be on the road 365 days a year. But I also don't want to be at home 365 days a year. I'd like a good mix. Some other artists that have really done a great job of keeping kind of a wholesome lifestyle in such a crazy industry. Josh Turner is a huge inspiration of mine. He's got that low voice too. And he also is very family oriented, and he's not quite the center of attention, which I like to. But I think those two do represent a lot of it. As far as songwriter skill, boy, I would love to have the same skill as Chris Stapleton. That would be not just as a performer, but he's done work across multiple genres. He's written in blues. He did the Steel Drivers, which is a bluegrass band for a long time. He done pop and country, and I mean, the guy is just unbelievable with a pen in his hand.
We had him over at C2C last year. He headlined one night. He's incredible. So I love the fact that he plays on a massive stage and he brings the smallest show with him. It was literally just him, his wife, a drummer. Yeah, incredible. So there's a quote. There's a heavier question for you. There's a quote from you on the press release for the single, and I love it. So I wanted to read it out for the listeners and then get you to explain it to me. So you say, so it's hard work, dedication, and authenticity of my music is what's really important. No, I love that. Break that down for me.
So when entering the industry, it's just like any other entertainment industry. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of really poisonous things in the industry. I mean, not quite as much. It's definitely not as front and center today as it used to be. But there's a lot of alcohol and drug abuse in the industry, and there's a lot of sellout in the industry too. I'm not a wealthy individual. I don't come from a family that has a lot of money, and I'm not the kind of person to burn bridges to get ahead of other people. And I think there are a lot of people in the industry that are like that. And I'm not going to mention any names by any means, but when people post about, this drives me crazy. They will post something that is more so about the attractiveness of them as an individual versus them as a musician. They'll post their fancy cars, or they'll post their rock hard abs, which is great. Like I'm happy that you're very in shape and that you have a really nice car. But when I talk to my fans, I want them to know that I'm here for the music. I have a life, and if they want to know more about that, I'm happy to share it. But I'm also a pretty personal person. I don't like to share a lot of my inner thoughts and things because I'm not here to be your life coach. I'm not here trying to be your personal trainer or your car salesman. I'm here because I do what I love and I believe in what I do, and people come to me for music. They don't come to me, to see, what clothing I'm wearing or anything like that. And I think that's where a lot of big time artists lose themselves in the industry. And I don't ever want that to happen. I don't want to look back and say, man, if I wouldn't have taken that commercial deal with, whatever company, I don't know where I'd be. I'd rather say, man, I did this. I worked hard. I dedicated my time and my effort and my energy to put in the work and do it the right way. And I think if you do that, it will last forever versus an artist that goes in and buys their way into the industry and dumps loads of money and has whatever followers, whatever. It's just, I feel like if you do it the right way and you connect with people, that relationship will just last forever. And that's one of the reasons why I try to stay so connected with my fans. Whenever I get a message, I mean, if I may not be able to respond to it that day, but my inbox is always at 0 because I respond to every single person. And I don't even get that same treatment from other artists, and I'm an artist. I'll reach out to somebody that I think is, at the same level as me. I'm like, hey, do you want to write together? Do you want to promote together? And they won't even open the message. And I'm like, how do you expect your fans to care so much about you if you don't care about the people that are supposed to care about you? So that's what I mean by a lot of that is that authenticity feel, and that connection that you can have with people and your fans.
And that's a brilliant segue onto my next question. So let's take that one word then, authenticity. Living and working in Nashville, where, the commercial bandwagon, unashamedly keeps churning out hits. It's essentially a production factory, isn't it? Is it hard to keep authenticity and stay real for yourself in the face of temptation like that?
It's funny you use the word temptation. One of my songs is called Temptation, but it talks about the hard, and that song is actually kind of drives right home into it. I'm a religious individual, and I believe that everything happens for a reason, but I also believe in being true to who you are. I've had so many people, and maybe they don't even know that they're doing it, but they double cross. People that I've helped in the past, I reach out to, not even for a helping hand, but just to stay in contact, and they can't do it. And I find it hard because it's so easy. It's so easy to just give into that and to worry about yourself. And I can't be okay with me at the end of the day doing that. And if I don't have that authenticity within myself, how can I expect my fans to be real with me? How can I expect to succeed? I've never had success by cheating my way in. Everything that I've ever done, I sat in my room for 6 hours a day at the age of 14 learning how to play guitar. I didn't just plug in a thing and was like, it doesn't just happen that way. You have to put real time and dedication into anything that you do if you want to see positive results. And that's a hard pill to swallow because it's not easy and you don't always succeed. Like I said, went into radio. Got my degree in video production. I'm not a Hollywood editor for a big movie firm. I'm not big radio personality in the U.S. None of those things happened, though they were dreams that I had. It all worked out the way it was supposed to because I put in the time and the effort into the things that I wanted to put time and effort into. And at the end of the day, that's music.
Good answer. So let's move away from the more serious questions there. So, like to throw a few in. So do you have a release timeline for the project? Something you're working towards, or can't you say yet?
Sure. So right now the rate that I'm kind of cranking these out is every 6 months.
Okay.
So I think to have another one out probably around February or March of next year. Probably the same time as we are in right now for the one after that. And it's kind of going to depend on what's happening in the world too. One of the reasons why a lot of people didn't hear about my latest release, Love Hangover, is because of the timing. It happened the day the tornadoes came through here in Nashville, which the quickest way to kill a movie or a song or anything like that is to release it on the day of a natural disaster, which you can't help. But it definitely was painful. But looking forward, that's kind of the timeline that I hope to achieve. And I've got songs. I mean, one of the worst things about releasing single by single is the backup of music. I've got probably 24 songs after this project ready to go into the studio and record. After it's all said and done, I got to figure out which ones I want to do. There's cover projects that I want to work on. There's maybe I want to work on a Christmas song. There's so many ideas that I want to engage in, but with the structure of the plan that I have, I need to follow what I've started in order to get that to that point.
And who's on your Spotify playlist at the moment? Who have you got on repeat?
So I don't typically listen to a lot of the new music, which is funny because that's what I strive to be.
No one does. No one does.
Well, I listen to it, but it's definitely not the thing that's on repeat for me. And here, I'll pull up my Spotify right now so I can see what exactly I've been looking at. So I actually I had some friends over and we were doing kind of a throwback thing.
Nice.
Having a few drinks and listening to some throwback music. So there's some Usher on my playlist. If we're talking about country, I love to check out the new stuff from time to time. Like the release radar is definitely a cool thing. And what is it? I think it's Sam Hunt's new one that he had, or I don't even think it's that new. I think he released it last year. He's got a tune that has like the old timey song in the beginning of it. I love that.
Hard to forget.
Hard to forget, yes. And I love that. I think it's so cool that he integrated that. Some of my most inspirational artists that I listen to and repeat for a long time. I'm a huge Cody Johnson fan.
Okay.
Texas country, which I love Texas country. Being a Tennessee boy, it's hard to turn away from Nashville country. Country is just so great. There is a country duo that I actually got to see the very last show that they did together. I don't even think they're a group anymore. Is Walker McGuire. They are phenomenal. If anybody gets a chance to listen to them, I know every single song that they ever released by heart. I mean, it's one of those groups that I cannot stop listening to.
Nice. Right, the last two questions, the two most important questions of the entire interview. If you can have one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I think that's a pretty easy question.
Is it going to be pizza or tacos?
It's definitely, tacos, but any form of tacos, burritos, crunch wraps. I have, there's a restaurant here in the southeastern part of the United States called Chewy's. It's a Tex-Mex place.
Okay.
They have the most unbelievable spicy jalapeno. It's like a ranch thing.
Yeah.
There's actually not much ranch in it. It's mainly mayonnaise, which is gross. But but it is the best dip in the whole world. So that mixed with tacos and burritos, I mean, I honestly could eat that every single day, and I would be so happy.
That's a good option. You guys have a lot of taco trucks in Nashville, I'm told. Is that true?
Tons of food trucks, tons and tons of food trucks, and little boutique restaurants there on every other corner. I can't keep up. I mentioned the tour company earlier. It's actually a food tour company.
Oh, okay.
History and the best foods, but we're kind of constricted to walking distance and being downtown commercialized. But there's a place that we go to where we get hot chicken tacos. So talk about putting two of my favorite things in one meal. I mean, it's just out of this world.
Good choice. No judgment there. You pass. And what's your last drink? If you could only have one drink, I mean, you can have alcoholic, you can have non-alcoholic, or both.
So I actually was sober for about a year last year. I got in a pretty bad car accident. I used to work at a bar downtown Nashville, and I worked pretty late one night. And on my way home, I fell asleep at the wheel and hit the median going 75 mile an hour on the interstate. Walked away with a bump on my head and a scratch on my leg, virtually untouched. And it gave me a wake up call and I wasn't even drunk that night. It was just a late night. I hadn't had anything to drink, but I figured I'm going to be out late playing shows and doing these things. I probably shouldn't be drinking because I'm going to wake up with a hangover. I'm going to be, not in a position to drive and living 45 minutes away. It's difficult to do. So I gave it up for about a year. Which was not as hard as I thought it would be. But I also started a bartending business here in 2020. And if you're going to recommend drinks, you probably should drink them before you.
You've got to.
Right. But I do love alcohol. I love the process, the science behind it is so cool. I'm definitely a whiskey drinker. I don't think I had a choice being in Tennessee, but Tennessee whiskey is great. If I had to choose a specific whiskey, Jack Daniel's obviously is great, but I'm actually a big fan of a whiskey that comes from Iowa. It's called Templeton Rye. It's a rye whiskey, and it is so great. It's delicious. They have multiple different versions of it, and I love trying new alcohols. But if I had to choose a whiskey, that would probably be the one. As far as an actual drink, I also am a huge fan of ginger ale, which goes great with whiskey.
Nice.
And pineapple juice. Ginger ale and pineapple juice mixed together make one of the best punches of all time.
Nice. Will we hopefully see you in the UK one day? Is that on the cards? All being well, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Well, I wanted to bring this little thing into it. I'm glad you asked that question. I had done a demo work for the producer that I was talking about earlier for a guy in the UK whose song is actually up for the UK Radio Song of the Year this year. And hopefully we make the finals with the song. It's called My Hebridean Home, which I didn't even know what Hebridean meant when I recorded the song. But obviously it's a pretty kind of traditional style song. But if that were to win that award, I would hope that I would at least get the opportunity to go over and be a part of that ceremony. If that doesn't happen, my plans are to come over sometime next year. Because during this promotion time, I'll be putting out this song, Come On Over, and the following 3. So right in the middle of that, I would love to come over and do maybe a couple weeks in the UK or maybe even Europe and do just a good push of live shows. And working with Scarlet River has been an absolute, it's been one of the best experiences of a team that I've got the chance to work with. And talk about a connected team. They know everybody.
They're a good group.
I've done more interviews in the last week than I've done in the last year, and I'm so excited to meet all the people that I've had the chance to talk with, like yourself and all the other folks in the industry. And I've also never been over there ever, so I would love the opportunity just to get to be in the area, in the country, and to see everything that you have to offer.
Perfect. Lastly, before I forget, where can people find you on social media?
Absolutely. So I've made it pretty easy. You can find me on pretty much any social media platform by typing in that's THE, and then my name, Kyle Elliott. Last name has 2 T's at the end of it. That's very important. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, even TikTok. I finally was forced to do that. And also the website is just www.thekyleelliott.com. You can find all my information, bio, music, merchandise. New merchandise is coming, by the way. I'm very excited about that. But yes, it's all under the same name.
Perfect. Kyle, thanks so much for coming on.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
My chat with Kyle Elliott there, with thanks to Rachel Selleck for arranging that one, and for Kyle for taking the time out to speak with me. I've got to say, Kyle is a stand-up guy. After the interview, we had a great chat, and we were chatting about where he could perform in the UK, artists who regularly play here that come from overseas, and his commitment to making himself in the UK is really commendable. If you like the podcast, please do like, subscribe, rate, review it. All that kind of stuff really does help. You can find the show wherever you listen to podcasts, and the show is on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, or using the handle Total Country Pod. If you want to contact the show, please drop an email to totalcountrypod@gmail.com. My guests next time are the Adelaides, so do join me then for what's sure to be a great interview with one of the UK's most exciting country groups, a band that have opened for Michael Bublé, are regularly featured on Radio 2, are a staple to Country, and have toured with Charles Eston, aka Deacon Claiborne from the Nashville TV series. But that's all for now, so until next time, see you then. I've been Kevin. You've been great. Thanks for listening. Keep it country. Bye for now.